Good evening and welcome to Copperfields Books virtual event with Meg Waite Clayton. My name is Jamie Madsen. I'm the marketing and events coordinator here, and I'll also be your host for the evening. So just a couple notes before we dive in tonight. Go ahead and keep an eye on your chat box. I will be putting links for the discount code in there, links to buy tonight's title, as well as previous titles by Meg. And additionally, the format will feature between 40 to 45 minutes of speaking and will then be followed by a live Q&A. For any questions or comments that you have for the speaker tonight, go ahead and put them in the Q&A icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. So now I'm really excited to introduce tonight's author. Meg Waite Clayton is a New York Times bestselling author of 7 prior novels, including the international bestseller, The Last Train to London, which we'll share later. She has written for the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Chronicle, the Washington Post, and public radio, often on the subject of the particular challenges that women face. She lives here in the San Francisco Bay Area and is here with us tonight to discuss her new title, The Postmistress of Paris. So thanks for being with us tonight, Meg. I'm so excited to hand it over to you.
My absolute pleasure, Jamie. Thanks for having me, and thanks to Copperfields for hosting me. Hi to everybody who is here. I don't know about you all, but I'm a writer, which means I spend most of my time playing in my office playhouse with my imaginary friends, writing books. So my days in this kind of crazy time that we're living in aren't so different than I've always spent them. But despite my still getting to spend my working days pretty much as usual, I miss so many people. So I am really particularly grateful for your company tonight, and only sorry I'm not there in person. So the upside is you can see my little office playhouse here. So welcome. This is actually where I spend hours and hours and where I live and write. And I will try to maybe show you guys around. I'm thinking I don't even have, anyway, you feel free when we get to the Q&A to ask me anything about anything, what my office is like, how I work, how I get ideas, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to talk for just a little bit about the novel, the history behind it, and how I wrote it. And for that, I'm going to share some images, and then just any questions you have, just throw them in the chat, as Jamie said. I'll tell you, just a little dirty secret that you're seeing the clean part of my office. On the other side of the computer screen, the piles are out of sight. Anyway, welcome. When I first proposed the idea for the Postmistress of Paris, a Chicago heiress converts a French chateau into a safe haven for artists and writers she helps smuggle out of Vichy, France. My literary agent said, with a piano player, we'd have a female-driven Casablanca. The Postmistress of Paris is inspired in part by a real Chicago heiress who moved to Paris when she was not yet 20 and was still living there a decade later when Hitler invaded in 1940. While most expats came home, she stayed and tried to help smuggle out prominent artists and writers. She rented a ramshackle villa where she housed refugees and hosted salons at which they literally hung art in the trees. The name of that heiress, the real heiress, was Mary Jane Gould, and she's one part of the inspiration for the Postmistress of Paris, which is a love story, sort of tale of high-stakes danger about a young heiress, codenamed the Postmistress. That's where the title comes from. It's a code name, and a refugee photographer being hunted by the Nazis. It's heavily fact-based fiction, drawing on France's internment of famous refugees, Varian Fry's effort to help them escape, and Mary Jane Gould's part in that. I'll tell you, it's also the scrapings of my own heart, trying to understand what it means to leave, to stand literally at the top of a mountain and look back on a life, people you've loved, the only place you've ever called home. So I'm going to start with about 2 minutes and 3 images on how I started writing. I know it's the Bay Area, so some of you may have seen this, so I won't go over long on it. But for those of you who haven't, I would like to share it. And perhaps I should warn you that what you're about to see may disturb some of you. So this is me, circa 1970. I'm 11. Already in my second year of braces, and just about to go on that most horrible of shopping trips for a girl not yet in the 6th grade to buy my first brassiere. We'd moved to Los Angeles for 6 months to a neighborhood without children, leaving me to the mercy of my 4 brothers in the company of books. What I did most mornings was ride my bike to the library, where they were having a summer reading contest. All you had to do to win was to read the most books. So of course, wanting to win, because I am very type A, I chose short books. But then the librarians began putting books like A Wrinkle in Time and To Kill a Mockingbird in my hands, and in reading those longer books, I began to imagine becoming a writer myself. So fast forward 2 years, I'm in the 8th grade, back in the Chicago area, and I'm asked to stay after school by Mrs. Thompson, who was my English teacher at the time. Well, I was a good student, but not always well behaved, and I was inclined to chat with my friend Colleen Gibbons, who sat next to me in that class at the back, even during spelling tests. So I imagined that I was in for a scolding. But it turned out what Mrs. Thompson wanted to talk to me about was a poem I'd written, which she wanted to encourage me to submit for publication. So I submitted it to the only magazine I knew that published poetry, which was 17 magazine. Well, they rejected it. It turns out 17 publishes poems by Pulitzer Prize winners and not generally poetry written in purple ink on line paper by 14-year-old girls. It was 20 years before I ever submitted anything again, and that's a whole nother story, one I've sometimes told, but I'm not going to tell tonight. But it did involve, late night drinking and one amazingly supportive guy. But in case you don't think that early support meant the world to me, note that I still have this poem I wrote nearly half a century ago with my teacher's mark still on it. So thank you, librarians and teachers, for the way you inspire us. So again, the premise of The Postmistress of Paris. A Chicago heiress converts a French chateau into a safe haven for artists and writers she helps smuggle out of Vichy, France. Both the real heiress, Mary Jane Gold, and my fictional one, who is called Naneé, are actually from Evanston. Evanston, Illinois is a town north of Chicago near where I spent most of my growing up years, although I'll tell you the houses I lived in were pretty dodgy compared to the mansion that Mary Jane Gold grew up in. Never mind her Michigan summer home, my summer home was mostly a tent. But like Gold, my Naneé moves to Paris when she's not yet 20 and is still living there a decade later when Hitler invades. She joins the effort of fellow American Varian Fry, who came to France with a secret list of notable artists and intellectuals he could get American visas for, if only he could get these folks out of the hands of the Nazis. We're talking artists like Picasso and Matisse and Chagall, writers like Hannah Arendt, Nobel laureates, and other great thinkers, some of whom, it would turn out, did not want to be gotten out. Many of those on Varian Fry's list had been put in internment camps by the French even before Hitler invaded. Like Germany, France interned Jewish refugees even before the country fell to Hitler. They were considered enemy aliens, much as the Japanese in the US were considered enemy aliens. They were thought maybe even to be spies for Hitler, never mind that they were Jewish and had to flee their homes to safety in France. This camp you see in this picture here, Camp de Mille, was in an old brick factory. It was converted into an internment camp. A lot of artists and intellectuals ended up interned there because of its location, which was in Provence, where many of them had settled. There is actually a little town on the south coast of France called Solarization, which was referred to at the time jokingly as the capital of German literature because so many German refugees lived there. So Mary Jane Gold did some awesomely courageous things to help these folks get to freedom. A lot of what I know about her comes from this book she wrote, Crossroads, Marseille, 1940. You might notice this cover is in French. I'm going to spare you the kind of long Shaggy Dog story about how it's out of print in English, but I managed enough mangled French to buy a copy in a Paris bookstore. But let's just say the effort simply to buy it, communicating in French, should have been a sign of how long it would have taken me to read it in French. So fortunately, I found an English copy in a library. And I'll tell you just a little bit, since I'm on this slide here, when I do these events, I have as my background my working board, which is what you see behind there. I think you can't really tell what it is in that picture, but what it is it's a magnetic paint on a wall, and those little cards you see are 3x5 note cards, and they're part of my writing process that I'll try to remember to talk about later on when we're talking about writing. And I'm sorry, I can't show it to you now. I'll tell you, my kids were, I have two grown sons who were home for the holidays, and my office doubles, as does my husband, doubles as a guest room or a room for our kids. So, and because that board is magnetic, the magnets come off pretty easily, and the bed, when you open it up, takes up most of the room. And so rather than have the whole setup come flying down and all over the room, I had to take it down before my son came. So, okay. So the real Mary Jane Gold found and rented a sort of a ramshackle villa, which was called Villa Herbel, and the whole group of people working to smuggle refugees out of France lived together there with her. They even hid some of the refugees there until they could smuggle them out of France. And at the same time, they somehow managed to have a lot of fun. Among other things, they hosted salons at which they played these crazy games they made up. The image on the left here is the result of a communal drawing game they called Exquisite Corpse. It started as a word game that was pretty simple. 5 players wrote words. Somebody wrote out an adjective, and somebody wrote a noun, a verb, another adjective, and another noun, each without knowing what the other person wrote. And then they strung it together to make these kinds of nonsensical sentences. And the name Exquisite Corpse, the name for the game, comes from an early sentence made during one of the games, which was, "The exquisite corpse drinks the new wine." The drawing game was similar. You had a folded piece of paper. It's like what you see here on the left. That was a blank paper. Somebody drew a head, and then somebody just pulled 2 lines over the fold, and then somebody connected a body, pulled 2 lines over the fold without seeing the head, and then the third person did the legs, or as you can see here, a tail, so that they made some pretty bizarre creatures. What you see on the right here is a deck of cards that they designed, not kings, queens, and jacks, because that was too monarchist and military, not what they believed in. So their cards, their face cards, were Genius, Siren, and Magus. They often held their salons out on the Belvedere at Villa Herbel, where they did, as I said earlier, literally hang art in the trees. This particular picture is of Danny Benedite, who's one of the real heroes who plays a role in the novel, hanging a painting by Max Ernst, a surrealist who plays a smaller role. And I'll tell you that this picture is one of the pictures that I saw that made me want to tell this story, because it's just so obvious that, and I think from it, that in this time of turmoil and great risk to their lives, they were also just having a good time, managing to have a good time together. So this real heiress, Mary Jane Gold, is part of the inspiration for my Postmistress Naneé, but my novel is actually a little bit of a mashup. Naneé does fly the same kind of airplane Mary Jane Gold did, which is this red Vega gull. My Naneé has an adorable dog named Dagobert, again like the real Mary Jane Gold. My Dagobert has a funny habit of barking like mad every time anyone says Hitler, Hitler. I tell you that Dagobert is the first major dog character I've ever written. And if you peel that little poodle face away, you will find behind it a golden retriever named Frodo, who was our last dog. Frodo passed away some years ago, but he was an amazing dog. So I kind of channeled Frodo in writing Dagobert, but that Hitler thing, the real Dagobert did that. Sometimes you just can't make it up better than it really was. So my Naneé is definitely made with a large dollop of Mary Jane Gold, but I also tossed in a bit of a German refugee whose name is Lisa Fitko. Fitko played a big role in helping refugees escape, but I can't tell you what it is, as I don't want to spoil the read. And there's obviously a lot of fiction in Naneé too. So The Postmistress of Paris is one part the story of this courageous American woman, but it's also the story of the refugee artists who fled Hitler's Germany for safety in France, only to be arrested and confined in French internment camps. The experiences of my photographer, Edouard, who flees the Reich with his toddler daughter, Lucy, and her stuffed kangaroo, Professor Ellie Mouse, only to end up in peril in France. They're drawn from the real experiences of men interned at Camp de Mille, children hidden in Paris, and refugees trying to escape over the Pyrenees. The men interned at Camp de Mille lived and ate and slept in this old tile factory that was still so thick with brick dust that they described the way it made the floor uneven to walk on and filled their lungs. In what's really a true testament to the human spirit, they made what used to be underground kilns, these places here, into little studios to create art in. They even set up a nightclub of sorts, like a Berlin cabaret in one of the kilns. They created art wherever they could, including on the ceiling beams. In this picture here, that bottom right part is a close-up of that ceiling beam that you see in the top picture. On the brick walls, and this is one of they were surrealists, so these pictures are these paintings and photographs and everything are surrealist art, something that I wasn't necessarily a fan of, but came to greatly admire. This is, I'll tell you, a piece of art that I use in the book, and I think it's kind of fascinating, and every time I look at it, I cannot figure out what it's about, but it is nonetheless fascinating. And also in the camp hall, they painted all the walls of the camp hall with these kind of frescoes. They wrote symphonies that they also performed in a sort of a makeshift theater that they set up in that camp hall. But in case you think, that that hall has tables where they sat and ate or anything like that, no. They basically lived most of their lives, including eating and sleeping, in that big empty place that I showed you at first. It's the same things for plays. They both wrote and performed them. Not only the interned men, but also the staff and even the camp captain came to see the shows. These were some pretty amazingly talented, often famous men, and the shows would have belonged in any of the world's most famous venues. So the photos, they kind of tend to make Camp de Mille look like a cushy existence. It wasn't, even under Free France. But after Hitler invaded, the plight of these people interned in these camps became more dire. Escape became more unnecessary and extremely dangerous, both for the prisoners and those like Mary Jane Gold who helped them escape. So this story becomes a very dangerous race against the clock to save lives. Many of the characters in the book are drawn from real people, and when I stick pretty closely to their real lives for their bits in my novel, I use their real names. So, for example, this guy on the top right there in the glasses, well, I guess they both have glasses, but anyway, that is Varian Fry, who brought the list to France from the United States and established and led the rescue network, which they conducted under the cover of something they called the CAS, the Centre Américain de Secours. My French is awful, as you can see. You should see how the French look at me when I'm there. But anyway, the CAS actually helped refugees in legitimate ways. And so that was kind of like the facade behind which they did this illegal work. And this photo, like many that I'm using here, comes from the US Holocaust Memorial Museum. This fellow here, his name is Bill Fryer. He was a Viennese political cartoonist who became the effort's forger. He could reproduce the official commissaire de police stamp and the official signature like nobody else. So unfortunately, he was caught forging documents and eventually deported to Poland. He was imprisoned first at Auschwitz and later at Buchenwald and Theresienstadt. He did survive, but I hope that will give you a sense of how dangerous the effort was. And this guy's one of my favorite characters from the real story. His name is Gussy Rosenberg, and he was a 19-year-old Jewish man who could pass, as you can see here, for an Aryan teenager, which was pretty handy for a Jewish person in France at the time. He actually ended up as a literature and language professor at Bard College here in the United States, and he just passed away on October 30th at the age of 100. This guy here is Leon Foshwanger. He was a Bavarian Jew and one of the world's most popular writers in 1940. He was known all over the world. He fled the Reich and settled in Saint-Rémy-sur-Mer, and then when the war broke out, he was declared an enemy alien and interned at Camp de Mille. This photo is from a display at Camp de Mille. It's been preserved as a museum and is well worth a visit. It's the only French internment camp, I think, that has been preserved, and it's just outside Aix-en-Provence. And if you ever get a chance to go there, you should. It's just a wonderful display. It does not take a long time to go through, and Aix-en-Provence is a really charming town, so it's a good excuse to go there. And this crazy looking guy is André Raton. He's one of the writers this rescue effort saved. He was French and a Gentile, but his writings were banned and he was wanted by the Nazis. So he and his wife and daughter lived at Villa Herbel for many months, actually, before they could be gotten out of France. He was the leader of some say the founder of the Surrealist movement. And as you can tell from this photo, quite a character. And I hope that I capture his character in the book because he is worth capturing. Okay, so I'm going to read for about, I don't know, 3 minutes, the opening page and a quarter. I don't love to read, I'll tell you, but whenever I don't, people say they want to hear my voice reading. But the reason I want to read here is because I'm going to go through, after I read this short passage, I'm going to go through a little bit about how I came to write it, what I did as I was writing it. So you can, it's like a little peek into your, into my writing process, honestly, so you can see that this isn't so much magic as just hard work. So Monday, January 17th, 1938, in the sky over Paris. The sky out the glass roof of her Vega Gull was as crimson as the airplane. Beyond the windshield and the gray whirl of propeller, 10,000 tons of iron stood laced against the setting sun. Naneé called over the roar of the Gypsy 6 engine, La Dame de Fer à son meilleur niveau. That's the kind of art I love, to Dagobert, her sole passenger, who wagged his unkempt poodle tail as they circled the Eiffel Tower. The Iron Lady at her best. She flew on up the looping Seine, headed back to Paris for the Exposition Internationale de Surrealism, 300 artworks depicting gigantic insects, bizarre floating heads, and dismembered or defiled bodies she knew were meant to be thought-provoking, but always left her feeling unsophisticated and far too American. Midwestern, not even from Chicago, but from Evanston. She loosened the white silk scarf at her neck as she initiated a controlled descent from 1,000 feet to 800, 600, 5, to buzz her empty apartment on Avenue Foch. She loved Paris, if only its winter nights weren't so long when you were 28 and living alone. She throttled back to idle and extended the flaps over the Bois de Boulogne, descending to 200 feet as she approached the Park's Lake, its small cascade and charming little Emperor's Kiosk. Up here in the air, there was no grumbling about Prime Minister Chautemps excluding socialists from the French government, no brother killing brother in Barcelona, no Hitler claiming to be eager for peace while all of Europe trembled. She dipped a wing for a better view to see the trickle of water over rocks into frozen lake and, oh Lord, a span of black wings stretched to white feathered tips at 10 o'clock, A red bill opened in a call of warning inaudible over the engine as she slammed the throttle wide open and yanked back the yoke, snapping to the right and climbing to avoid crashing into a black swan already diving to avoid her. But the nose of the plane was rising too quickly. Vertical speed 1,500 feet per minute. Through the windshield, nothing but sky. The airspeed indicator plummeting towards stall speed, the wings buffeting as the plane began to lose lift, the stall horn sounding its alarming blare. She pushed the yoke forward, rolling out of the turn, sending the nose dipping in an effort to recover from the stall. Dagobert tumbled forward as the altimeter unwound and the plane shot downward, the view now pure propeller and frozen lake. The ice, so little room to maneuver, poor Dagobert whimpering. The airspeed indicator at 45 knots, fingers aching from her grip on the yoke. I guess I'll leave it there. So that's the opening. And here we go, we'll start here. So as I write, I try to gather around me as much of the real history and places and place images and things like that as I can imagine. And so this scene opens obviously with Naneé in that plane over Paris. And for that, honestly, I'd have loved the excuse to learn to fly a small plane myself or get someone to fly me over Paris. But by the time I realized that was where this novel would start, we were into this COVID thing. So what I did instead was I found two people to help me. One is named Sue Holm. She responded to a Facebook post that I put up to tell me that her dad had flown one of the last Vega Gulls. She sent me photos of the plane inside and out, including this one here, and footage of the view through the windshield. And she provided me details about the specs of the plane. Since Dagobert's in the passenger seat in that scene, I had him on the screen beside me as I wrote the scene. But I'll tell you, the opening would be nothing like it is without the help of a man named Christopher Keck. Chris is a friend of a friend, and he set up the path Naneé was going to fly over Paris on a flight simulator, actually using the specs of that Vega Gull so I could see both how the plane would behave and what Naneé would see as she, for example, circled the Eiffel Tower or tried to recover from that stall. He shared it with me by Zoom and reworked it and reworked it and reworked it with me. So the flight was hopefully real and exciting. And I was using language that a pilot would use to describe what's going on. And I'm going to play you just 10 seconds of what it was many hours of Zoom so you can just get a little sense of it.
Eiffel and head over to the Arc. We're going to drop down to 800 feet.
So, of course, one of the very best bits of writing a novel set in France is being able to spend months there and call it work. This is me at the small cascade in the Bois de Boulogne, which she was just dipping down to see in that passage I read. And it's one of my favorite little places in Paris. It's just really lovely spot. So then after Naneé lands, I'll tell you when she's down on Earth, she changes from her flight gear into this purple Schiaparelli jacket that you see on the left there. She doesn't like the look though, so she immediately takes it off in favor of a more classic black Chanel dress. Lots of pearls and this Merritt Oppenheim designed Schiaparelli fur cuff bracelet, which is an element that echoes through this story. First of all, don't panic if you don't know who Merritt Oppenheim is or even Schiaparelli. I didn't know either of them before I started the research for this. And in the book, I'll either tell you, who they are or the context will make it clear. And honestly, mostly you don't really need to know. I absolutely promise there will be no pop quizzes after you read. So I put these here because it is easier to describe something that you're seeing than to just close your eyes and try to make up something. And if you use real elements that were actually there at the time, then it will seem real. And so I spend a lot of time looking for images on the internet and in books and things like that. It's a fun way to do research and a break from putting words on the page too. So then, still in this first chapter, which is only about 4 pages, maybe 6, I don't know, Naneé rushes off to the opening of a surrealist exhibit that really did open in Paris on the day that it does in the Postmistress of Paris. For writing that, I found the flyer that you see up here on the top left so that I could have the details. So you can see that, you know, one of the organizers was Edouard Moss, that funny guy in the glasses that I showed you earlier. I gathered photos of what the outside courtyard would look like, so I would know what Naneé is seeing in what turns out to be honestly just a one sentence as she arrives. What she sees is this car, which is not really a car, but a work of art by Salvador Dali called Rainy Taxi, or alternatively, mannequin rotting in a taxi cab. The mannequin passenger in the back seat was actually covered with live snails. And I found a lot of images of the exhibit itself too, where Naneé was spending a lot more time, including this one on the bottom here, which is one of the displays that was in the Real Surrealist exhibit. Don't tell the docent, but I did take down the real works of art and hang in their place my fictional photographs taken by my fictional Edward. At the exhibition, Naneé first encounters Edward. So I began to gather information about the kinds of cameras and photo gear he would have used. Also, this image on the bottom right that shows me these images showed me kind of some of the funky things that the surrealists did artistically, what it really meant. So this one is, the one on the right is actually a real person, as improbable as her perfect skin would make you think. And that's just a plain photograph. And then the one right next to it that looks kind of silvery was a technique that they called Solarization. So I gather lots of images around me, and I also gather documents like this interzonal postcard, which was for much of the period that France was split between occupied and free France, the only way that people could send mail out of occupied France. They would only be able to put a few words on those blanks, and that was all they were allowed to say. And so they were used, sometimes to send coded language when they could. Later on in the novel, this cable is sent from the State Department to Varian Fry. Basically, it's the US government telling him that they cannot countenance what he's doing, however meaningful their motives may be in carrying out the activities, evading the laws of countries in which the United States maintains friendly relations. In other words, Varian, please stop poking Vichy and Hitler with these illegal rescues. I'd read enough about this cable before I actually found it that I didn't actually need to see the thing, and it's only a very small little bit in the novel. But there's something about seeing it that makes it more real for me. Very few of the things I collect around me matter for more than a moment in the book, and many of them I just never use at all. But they put me, just having them around me puts me in the world I'm writing about, so that hopefully I can put you there too. So the novel's titled The Postmistress of Paris, and I do hope you'll enjoy that airplane loop around the Eiffel Tower and the touches of Paris fashion and art, and the inside of one very swanky flat that is exactly where the real Mary Jane Gould's apartment was. But it could, as the New York Times review that appeared on Tuesday, my first New York Times book review ever, so I was very happy to get it, and it was a nice one. But they took some issue at it being called The Postmistress of Paris, as much of it does take place in Provence, which is where both Camp de Mille and Villa Herbel were. But this is me wandering the Pannier district in Marseille, which despite the graffiti that you see here, looks far nicer than it did when Jewish refugees hid in its brothels and underground caverns, and where my Naneé risks her own safety to help them. Novel might even be titled The Postmistress of Chenonceau, this gorgeous Loire Valley chateau literally spanning the River Cher, which was the dividing line between occupied and free France. You can see here how the chateau bridges the river. That was that border. This inside shot is the gallery over the river and was used to smuggle people out of occupied France. And those doors that you see at the end there, those brown doors, they were sometimes referred to as the doors to freedom. And they were only sort of to freedom because even though the far side was free France was not so free. And the Nazis did not always, the Germans did not always strictly adhere to the border rules. So, but Casablanca, was my agent right about that? Well, yes, piano playing is involved in the Postmistress of Paris, it turns out, as are Nazis, cocktails, transit papers, and even lovers who first meet in Paris. You guys may know, if you saw the San Francisco Chronicle review, it was the first major review we got. It came out the Sunday before the book released in November. It called The Last Train to London, quote, Casablanca if Rick had an artsy bent, and went on to say lots of nice things and calling it powerful and all that good stuff too. But and I can say, as much as I love all the great things that have happened since then, Good Morning America was a people pick. It was a book of the month, alternative selection or add-on or something. It was a USA Today recommended and all that kind of stuff. Still, I glow every time I think about that comparison to my personal all-time favorite movie. But the novel turned out to be, as I think I said when I started this, very much about what it means to leave, to look back on a life in a home and then turn around and carry on to a new life, something you don't know at all. I've left so many homes myself, but never my native country. And still, it's never easy. And we so often judge refugees, like, what have they done to deserve to live here, without considering the impossible decision to leave even the most dangerous of homes. So I hope you'll read and enjoy The Postmistress of Paris as the adventure story it is, and the love story it is. The story about people managing to have great fun even in impossible times. But I also hope the novel will create kind of a moment to pause for you, to consider what leaving a life behind has and will always mean. Not just, for the people in World War II or the people who were caught behind the Iron Curtain, but for people today. And refugees today, they are also usually having to leave home. And I hope the novel does the real people involved in the history justice, and that my characters will inspire others as truly as these real people inspire me. So thanks for listening. I'm going to end the screen share here, and then I will, let's see if I can figure out how to do this now. Oh, there we go. And I'll take whatever questions you guys have.
Thank you so much for that. That was awesome.
My pleasure.
We have plenty of time for questions, so everyone feel free to submit them. Let's see here. So lots of great feedback. People are really enjoyed your presentation. But one question is around the writing process. So you spoke a little bit about, it sounded like you went over to France and did a little research there, but can you tell us a little bit about what went into that? And was this all during the quarantine and during COVID? How did that work out?
So the way I work, I am usually writing one book and researching the next one. So most of the research for this was done in the years before COVID. So I did do, I'm trying to think, I guess I did two trips to Paris, two research trips to Paris, and two throughout France, to the many places that were involved in the book. I meant to go back a third time. There are two places that play pretty prominent roles in the book that I didn't realize until, well, one of them I knew was going to be a role in the book, and the first time I went to Paris, I ended up getting the flu, and the next time I ended up, it ended up being 108 degrees weather, and this is something you had to do outdoors, and you couldn't possibly do it outdoors. And then the third time turned out to be the September after COVID started, and so we literally could not get to Paris. That's all, I love that bit of it. I will say I don't know whether I write to travel or travel to write. I love them in equal measure. But I do try to get to the places that I'm writing in. There are just things you don't expect, things you learn. Then also just kind of the many details, the way places smell and the sounds, and yes, sometimes they're different than they were, 100 years ago, but you learn a lot from being in a place, and you find things that you would never in a million years find. And then everything that wasn't done before COVID, I did things like that, like talk to Chris about, what I could do there and how I could do that. And one of the things that this particular time has reminded me of is the great kindness and generosity of people. I mean, people I've never met before who have no reason, like Chris is somebody I had no reason to spend so much time with me, and he spent literally hours and hours setting up the flight simulation, and then hours and hours showing me around, and taking me by Zoom, and it really was lovely. I mean, it's almost like the entire world is made of independent bookseller type people. I think I hope everybody here is a good supporter of Copperfields. I am a huge fan of independent bookstores. I think that they are truly where most writers get their start. I think an author's first champions are usually their local bookseller, and without local bookstores, we would literally, you can't. Authors would not get attention. It would just be the death of literature if we only had one bookseller or a couple of online booksellers. So I really appreciate you all being here at Copperfields, and I hope that, I was going to say, well, I know you can get your books cheaper on Amazon, but actually right now Amazon has been out of stock of my book for some weeks. So you need to get them at Copperfield. So do it now. I think you guys even have, you did at one point in time anyway, have book plated copies. So I think you can still get book plated copies from Copperfields, but I'm not sure.
We might need to get some more signed book plates from you, but I will definitely look into it. And thank you so much. Those sentiments are so appreciated about independent bookstores. And hearing how you write books makes it sound so much more fun. I mean, the idea of going there and just researching it, I mean, what a lovely experience. I do want to say we have a couple comments here. Elaine said, I loved reading the book and how you brought that awful, terrible time to life. I wonder what the salvation photo actually was, though, and how you chose it.
Well, let me think about that. The salvation photo was, it's so funny because you're into the next book. I mean, I'm already writing the next book, and I'm thinking, I know exactly the photo, and I know, and I can see it, but I'm not sure that I can remember who it was by. So hold on, I think I say in the acknowledgments. Yeah, it was inspired by, I mean, it's not exactly, but the kind of jumping off point I used for that, it's a fictional photo, but it's very like a photo called Nude Bent Forward, which is by Lee Miller. Lee Miller is just a truly amazing woman. She was a journalist and a photojournalist during this period. She learned a lot about photography from Man Ray, who is a very prominent surrealist photographer. But that's that photo. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
An anonymous attendee is wondering if your book will be translated to French and if there are any movie prospects. And you mentioned how your reception was in Paris, so that's great. And this person is thanking you so much for sharing your extensive research.
Oh, thank you.
Those kind of a few
Um,
questions. Let me know if you need
Yeah,
me
yeah.
to repeat
So let
them.
me see if I do the ones, and if I can get 'em- if I don't get them, I'll remind me.
Okay.
In French, I don't know yet. The Last Train to London is being translated into French. It was supposed to come out this year. The publisher asked this last year, 2021. The publisher asked if they could postpone it until 2022 because of COVID. They felt it would be better to bring it out after the pandemic, which, when is that going to be? And the way the way I understand that foreign rights work, like American rights, if I write a book in under my U.S. contract, my publisher almost invariably has basically a first right on my next book, so they have a right to see my next book first and make an offer. And if we can't reach a deal, then I can go sell it to somebody else. But that's the way it works. And my understanding is it works the same way in the foreign markets, but they don't have to, it's called the option, they don't have to exercise that option until after they've brought out the prior book. And so since the French publisher has not yet brought out the prior book, they don't have to make a decision yet on what to do about this one. I did, it's very weird because like this one, you can see here some of them. This, my last book, The Last Train to London, was translated into 23 languages, including
Wow.
this is the Bulgarian copy that I have a Bulgarian sister-in-law, and she brought it from
Wow.
Bulgaria. But like, I don't even know about this one from my Google alerts because that's my name at the top. That's Meg Waite Clayton,
Really?
apparently.
Huh.
So, but it's really pretty amazing.
That's great.
I mean, it's an alphabet I don't even know. There's all these characters I don't even know, and being translated is such an amazing experience. Your story reaches people that you literally could not say hello to on the street, and it's just every time I think about it, it's so moving. So
Wonderful. Yeah.
I love being translated. I know this, the Postmistress of Paris is being translated into a bunch of languages. I know Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. I think there's two different kinds of Portuguese. One is for Portugal and the other is Brazil, and I don't know what the difference is, but and Dutch. I think the first edition is going to be
Wow.
Dutch, and then a lot of the people who published The Last Train are only just publishing it or haven't even yet published it, so we won't know about whether they're going to exercise their options for a little bit yet. But I hope it reaches a big audience. It's very fun. Oh, and
That's
then
so
the
exciting.
next question was film, and the
Yes.
answer is not yet.
Yeah.
My film agent is just beginning to shop the Postmistress of Paris. It has a good meaty role for both a male and a female lead. So unlike The Last Train to London, which had no meaningful adult male lead, this is more Hollywood friendly, let's call it. So we'll see. They're expensive films to make, especially The Last Train to London would have been a very expensive film to make, and in these times, what's mostly getting made are smaller independent films. So we'll see. But I would
We'll
not
keep
say,
an eye out. Yeah.
yeah, if anybody out there is a film person, and come talk to me.
Wally
Talk to somebody about it.
commented, I loved the novel and seeing these images make it even more vivid. No one wants to leave their home, but many are forced to. I am French and learned so much about France during wartime. That was unexpected. I'd be happy to help if you need any help in the future with your French. I'm currently living in the Bay Area as well. Thank you for your lyrical writing and impactful storytelling. What a nice comments.
That's a very nice comment. Tell that person, did they give a name?
Yes, it's the name's Wally.
Wally.
We can put
Wally?
yes,
Wally?
Wally.
My email is Meg at Meg Waite Clayton, and email me because I would love to chat in French.
Clayton.com.
Yes, Meg at
Okay.
megwaiteclayton.com.
All right, I just shared
And
that.
anybody can reach me there with any questions they have. So, that's a public facing email, and please.
That's great.
I love that.
Okay, well, Lori's wondering, are your other novels influenced by real life events?
Well, so the last train to London definitely is. There was this very extraordinary woman whose name is Truus Weissmuller who led an effort called the Kindertransport effort to get she was kind of like the boots on the ground person to get they rescued about 10,000 children from the right before the war began, and so it's very that is a very much her story. I spent a lot of time researching her to find out about it. It's very much her story. And although the children and the families involved in that were transported out, the children and the families in the novel are fictional. They are drawn from a lot of research on what the real children and the real families went through. So that one is mostly in some ways, yes. The race, the one before that is called Beautiful Exiles. It is about I like to say it's about Martha Gellhorn and her first husband, Ernest Hemingway. They were lovers, and then they married, and they were both journalists and writers, and they had a very stormy and rich relationship, and it was a fun book to write. And the one before that, The Race for Paris, that is about women journalists in World War II France, hoping to be the first to report the liberation of Paris. And that is drawn from the real experiences of women who literally changed the future for female journalists by breaking all the rules, doing what they weren't supposed to do, and doing a dang good job of it. So that's, I think even going back to the Wednesday Sisters is set in the Bay Area, and it's about women at the dawn of the women's movement, 5 suburban moms at the dawn of the women's movement, and also about the development of Silicon Valley, basically. So it's got a couple of real elements going in there. Yeah.
And I did share links for these titles, which I'll also include in the email tomorrow. Lori says, thank you. So we have just enough time for me to ask about what you're working on now. I know you mentioned it a little bit, but I'm hoping, future will have in-person events and we can host you for that. But give us a little.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm so sorry not to be, having time to sign books and chat and all that kind of thing. I did 2 in-person events for this book, and then everything went to virtual.
Yeah, and we miss it.
Yeah, we do. I have a couple of projects that I am pushing forward now. One of them is again set in Paris and is during this time, World War II. This new one would be more solidly set in Paris, so maybe it should be called The Postmistress of Paris. But and it is a book about books, and that's really all I can say about it right now, I suppose. One of the
That's
things
easy to like.
yeah. And one of the things about writing is, I'll tell you, The Race for Paris, which was my 5th novel, I first pitched it to my publisher when after The Wednesday Sisters, which was my 2nd novel, and I had been saying it was going to, people asked what it would be next. I would say, I've got this book about these World War II women journalists, and it was going to be my 3rd book, and it was going to be my 4th book. And after I stopped saying it was going to be my next book, then it became my next book. So I'm a little superstitious about talking about it. But the other book is, the other story idea is a little different. It is it would be set in Carmel in the 1950s, and deal with Hollywood and the blacklist, and some of the history of Carmel, which is a fascinating little place itself. So we'll see which gets done first. We'll see.
Well, they both sound very exciting, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. And it's been such a lovely hour. Lots of feedback to everyone. Yes, this is being recorded. You will all receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, details about tonight's title, the discount code, previous works by Meg, and everything you need. So on that note, I want to thank you, Meg. And yeah, we will get you in person when we can finally do it again.
Thank you, Jamie, and thanks to everybody at Copperfields. I'll tell Barbara I said thanks, and thanks everybody for being here. It's been lovely to spend the evening with you.
Great. See you next time.
Mhm.